One teenager, two shots, and the world exploded into the deadliest war humanity had ever seen. Here's the real story they never taught you. World War I didn't begin with tanks, trenches, or machine guns blazing. It began with something far smaller, a single decision made by a man who had no idea that every step he took would drag the world into one of its deadliest nightmares. Our story starts in June 1914, in a city every empire wanted control over, Sarajevo. A city full of tension, whispers, and danger. Empires watched it carefully, revolutionaries plotted quietly, and ordinary people walked the streets without knowing history was seconds away from exploding. On the morning of June 28th, a royal motorcade glided through Sarajevo. In the back seat of one of those cars sat Archduke Franz Ferdinand, heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne, and his wife, Sophie. They believed it would be a symbolic visit, a message that the empire was strong, united, and unbreakable. But lurking in the shadows were 7 young assassins, members of a Serbian nationalist group called the Black Hand. Most of them were teenagers, armed with pistols, bombs, cyanide, and an unwavering belief that killing the Archduke would free their people from Austria-Hungary's rule. For them, this wasn't terrorism, it was liberation. For Europe, it would become the first domino. As the motorcade rolled along the riverbank, an assassin named Nedeljko Čebrinović stepped forward. His hand trembled, but he hurled a bomb at the Archduke's car. The device bounced, missed the target, and exploded beneath the next vehicle, injuring officers and civilians. The city erupted into chaos. People screamed, soldiers moved, police dragged the failed attacker away. And the Archduke, shaken but calm, insisted on visiting the wounded in the hospital. This decision, this moment, became the turning point of the entire century. Because while the Archduke continued his visit, one assassin remained in the city. A 19-year-old student named Gavrilo Princip. He believed the attempt had failed. He wandered into a cafe, exhausted, thinking the mission was over. But fate had a different plan. As the Archduke's car tried to reroute through the city, the driver made a simple mistake, a wrong turn. The car stalled, and standing only a few steps away was Princip. The moment of silence, a heartbeat, a decision that would murder millions. Princip raised his pistol. 2 shots shattered the quiet street. One hit Sophie, the other struck the Archduke. Franz Ferdinand whispered his final words to his dying wife. "Sophie, don't die. Stay alive for our children." The world shifted in that instant. By nightfall, the assassination spread across Europe like a wildfire. Austria-Hungary blamed Serbia. Serbia sought help from Russia. Germany promised to stand behind Austria-Hungary with blank check support. France and Britain watched nervously as alliances tightened like a noose around the continent. None of them wanted a world war, but none of them would back down, because backing down meant losing power, land, or respect. The leaders of Europe didn't know it yet, but their next decisions would lead to trenches stretching 475 miles, battles lasting months, weapons no one had ever seen before, and a generation of young men vanishing into mud, gas, and gunfire. And it all began not with an army, not with an invasion, but with 2 bullets fired by a teenager. The assassination of Franz Ferdinand should have been a small crisis, tragic, Shocking, politically explosive, yes, but not a world-ending disaster. Instead, it triggered something far more dangerous. A chain reaction built on fear, pride, old rivalries, and a network of alliances that locked every nation into war, whether they wanted it or not. Europe at the time was like a room filled with gunpowder. The death of the Archduke was simply the match. Austria-Hungary's furious ultimatum. After the assassination, Austria-Hungary's leaders felt humiliated. They thought Serbia had helped plot the attack. Their generals wanted war, not just to punish Serbia, but to crush nationalism growing inside their own empire. On July 23, 1914, they sent Serbia a brutal ultimatum. Accept every demand without question, or face war. Some demands were reasonable. Others were designed to be impossible, like letting Austrian agents operate inside Serbia. Serbia agreed to most demands, but Austria-Hungary didn't want peace. They wanted a fight, and behind them stood a powerful ally ready to help: Germany. Germany's blank check. Germany's Kaiser Wilhelm II was restless. He believed Germany was surrounded by enemies, France to the west, Russia to the east, and that a war was coming sooner or later. So when Austria-Hungary asked for support, Germany offered a dangerous promise: a blank check, meaning they would back Austria-Hungary no matter what. This gave Vienna confidence. Too much confidence. They prepared to crush Serbia, but Serbia had a protector too. Russia mobilizes. Russia saw itself as the guardian of all Slavic nations. When Austria threatened Serbia, Russia felt it had no choice but to step in. Tsar Nicholas II faced a terrifying decision: let Serbia fall and lose influence, or mobilize and risk war. On July 30th, Russia mobilized its entire army. It wasn't a declaration of war, just preparation. But Germany saw it as a threat. Germany declares war. Once Russia mobilized, Germany reacted instantly. On August 1st, Germany declared war on Russia. But Germany had another fear. If they fought Russia, France would join in. Germany didn't want to fight a two-front war, so they moved first. The Schlieffen Plan. For years, Germany had a secret strategy: strike France first, defeat them quickly, then turn east to fight Russia. But there was a problem. To reach France fast, German armies had to march through Belgium, a neutral country. Invading Belgium would drag one more empire into the war: Britain. And that is exactly what happened. On August 4th, when German troops entered Belgium, Britain declared war. The world falls into the flame. By early August 1914, Europe was no longer negotiating. It was mobilizing. Millions of young men marched through their capitals, waving flags, singing, shouting that they would be home by Christmas. They didn't know the truth. They were marching into a slaughter the world had never seen before. Machine guns that could fire 600 rounds a minute. Artillery shells that could erase towns. Poison gas that burned lungs and blinded soldiers. Tanks that would crawl across no man's land like iron beasts. The governments promised quick victory. What they delivered was 4 years of misery. And as armies moved, borders dissolved, alliances grew, and empires prepared for total war. The stage for the deadliest conflict in human history was being built, day by day, decision by decision. Europe had spent decades building huge armies, massive fleets, and deadly new weapons. But when the war finally arrived, no one truly understood what they had created. What happened in the early weeks of World War I shocked the world and shattered the illusion that the conflict would be short, clean, or glorious. The march into Belgium. Germany expected an easy advance through Belgium. Instead, they encountered fierce resistance. Belgian soldiers blew up bridges, slowed railway lines, and fought with incredible determination. The German army responded brutally. Towns were burned. Civilians were executed. The world was horrified. Britain used this brutality as fuel, saying they were fighting to defend small nations from destruction. This turned public opinion sharply against Germany and helped Britain rally millions into the war. The Western Front begins. Germany swept into France much faster than expected. French and British troops clashed with them in battles that turned the countryside into chaos. Fields ripped apart, villages shattered, rivers stained with blood. Then came the battle that changed everything, the Miracle of the Marne. In early September 1914, Germany reached the outskirts of Paris. The city prepared to fall. People fled. Government offices emptied. It seemed France was about to be crushed. But France launched a desperate counterattack near the Marne River. Taxi drivers were ordered to ferry soldiers to the front. Factories stopped working so more men could join the fight. Britain struck Germany's flank. And after days of brutal combat, the German advance stalled. Germany's dream of a quick victory was dead, digging into the earth. Both sides began racing north, trying to outflank each other in what became known as the Race to the Sea. But no matter how far they moved, neither side could break through. So soldiers did the only thing they could. They dug. First shallow holes, then deeper trenches, then entire underground fortresses. By the end of 1914, a continuous network of trenches stretched from the North Sea all the way to Switzerland. Nearly 475 miles of mud, rats, fear, and death. This was not the war anyone had imagined. This was a war where millions would die just to capture a few hundred meters. Life in the trenches. The trenches became the symbol of World War I. Mud up to the knees, rats the size of cats, corpses buried in the walls, shells exploding night and day, machine guns sweeping no man's land. Soldiers living in fear of gas attacks, the constant smell of death. Nations had built modern weapons, but their soldiers were fighting in medieval conditions. A global war. As Europe burned, colonies and allies worldwide were dragged in. India sent over 1 million soldiers. Japan seized German territories in Asia. Canada, Australia, and New Zealand joined Britain. The Ottoman Empire entered the war and fought. Russia. Africa became another battlefield. What started as a Balkan crisis became a world war. The war everyone expected never came. By the end of 1914, Germany realized the quick victory was gone. France was bleeding, but unbroken. Britain had transformed into a full war machine. Russia was mobilizing millions. Austria-Hungary was struggling to keep up. The Western Front was frozen in place. The Eastern Front was exploding with massive battles. Leaders thought the war would last months. But by the time trenches were dug, one truth became clear. This war would consume an entire generation.